I'm going to do something slightly different than I've done in all the other interviews I've done. There have been about 4 dozen in the past. And it's something I learned from my grandson Jack. I had given him some fossils and was taking pictures for the article that I was writing about the fossils and the trilobites. And at the 15, 20 minutes after taking the 15, 30 or 40 or 50 pictures, Jack says, I want to take some pictures. And had I been his father, or my kids, when they were growing up, I'd probably dismissed it and said, you don't have to do it, I'll do it. But I listened to him, and he loves the ability to take a picture. And so one of the things I learned from that experience was to listen to people. And the learning that I came from, developed from it, was to interview people from now on about what's important to them and not important to me.
Sure.
And so what I need you to do, Chris, is to tell me a handful of things that make you tick or make who you are important to you. What are the central things that make you who you are today?
Well, it's a really interesting question. I think at the core of all of it is a grudge match with knowledge. I despise the idea that there is information or knowledge in the world that I don't possess and have readily at hand. When I come upon books, when I come upon documentaries, when I come upon podcasts, anything where somebody is presenting their ideas or presenting knowledge, I want to conquer it, and I want to know it, and I want to be able to take it and hold it and fiddle with it and turn it back and forth and try and examine its facets. So I think more than anything else, it's the notion, the idea that there are things in this world that I don't yet understand, and a drive to do that as best as I can.
And have you thought about why you have that grudge match? That would be that I would like to find out.
I come from a family of folks that have both a deep bench, so to speak, as far as very well read, erudite, really, really interested in the world around them, and each of them bringing their own ideas to the table, a household where intellectual and ontological conversations were part of dinner table conversation, and I think just that natural curiosity was there. But I also come from a family where Trivial Pursuit is almost a blood sport of a game, and that there's a desire to not just know, but to be able to come forth with an answer at the drop of a hat, even if we have to drop the hat ourselves.
And so if you're driven on the educational basis, has that gotten in your way?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And I think that where it got in my way, or has gotten in my way more than anything else, was right after graduating from high school. I'd done 12 years of Catholic schools and 12 years of expected learning. Here's what you have to do, and at the end of the day, mom and dad are paying for it, so I've got firstborn guilt of I have to be a good steward of this that I'm responsible for, but also just the institution of this is what is expected of you, and the desire to meet that expectation. When I hit college, that natural curiosity manifested itself not in a desire to stay engaged in school and in an educational setting, but to figure it out on my own. As opposed to continuing to embrace the system as it was. I rebelled against it, and I was much more interested in sitting in the Circle Center at UIC drinking coffee and pontificating about the world or whatnot than I was in going to class and doing what school was supposed to be at the time. But I remained a lifelong learner, and my education was founded in bookstores and magazine subscriptions and just a constant curiosity. So it got in my way in that it took me until I was 36 to go back to school and begin getting
That was my next question. What was the thing that
paperwork?
moved it?
What moved it in part was my as of yesterday 14-year-old son, and the idea that I didn't want him to he's mine in so many ways, and I didn't want him to find himself caught up in the same trap that I did. And I kind of wanted to show him that it's a whole heck of a lot harder to go back and do this with a wife and a child and a mortgage and a full-time job and all these other things. So, in part it was that, and in part of it was just to show him that no matter whatever route he chose, that it's never too late to go and, if you have a goal for yourself, education, just go and do it. You'll get it done. So that I think was a big part of it as well. And then once I got back into it, it was that I fell in love with it. Within weeks of being back in the system. I mean, I went to before I re-enrolled at Moraine, I went to a lecture that was open to the public at University of Chicago in their comparative human development program, and I was nervous to walk in and sit down. I'm walking around on this fabled campus of essentially the Ivy League in the Midwest, one of the top universities in the country, if not the world, and I was intimidated by it. And I realized that the intimidation was not about what I knew or didn't know or my ability to understand or process or anything else. It was the lack of letters after my name, or the lack of the validation that comes with being able to say, here's what my degree is in. It's
no pain, no gain.
Right. So that's what drove me back to it.
So in one way, this interview is really going to be directed to your son, and what other people may gain from that interview is going to be the same thing if they listen to this interview.
Sure.
Okay, so what else do you want to tell your son, other than you don't want him to replicate some of the mistakes you made in your early life?
Well, I have this conversation with people often, and I think that one of the reasons that I became a writer out of I think I was born to it somehow. Books have always fascinated me, and from the time I was 6, I was scribbling down ideas for stories, and then as I got into my 20s and was heavily engaged in the fire service, I rediscovered my passion for writing by writing technical work, and essay type stuff. And while I say even now, fiction is therapy for me. If I sit down to write fiction, it's because I need a cathartic moment. And I rarely ever finish anything. But essay is my love, and kind of the exploration of essay, whether it's strictly educational or philosophical or anything like that. And so I say to people who ask about writing that I think anytime you sit down to write, it's a love letter to someone in some way, shape, or form. And most of my writing is written with my son as my ideal audience. The person that, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, it would be, okay, here's what I've written so far, pick up there and you can hopefully carry on, which is why things are heavily cited and there's, suggested reading lists and everything else. But I think the big thing that I'm working on right now is a project that I just recently started, and it's definitely being written with him in mind, about this idea that there are three sorts of people in the world. There are people who, when uncertainty and chance present them with opportunities, they seize the moment, and those are people who view life as an endless series of serendipitous moments. They seize serendipity. There are people who recognize that the moment is present, but either recognize it too late or don't respond to the moment with the appropriate decision. And those people I tend to see as the ones that are remorseful. They're the ones with the biggest fish stories, the one that got away kind of things. And then there are people that I think just abdicate their responsibility for finding moments in their own lives. And those are the people that neither recognize that an opportunity was presented nor responded to it. And if they have any kind of a negative outcome because of both missing it and not acting on it, they tend to externalize that onto some other actor, fate, chance, whatever, and they abdicate their responsibility for walking through the world, eyes open, searching for opportunities. And I think that, my hope for him and my hope for anybody for myself as well, is to try and maximize the ability to seize those serendipitous moments. And that means having a huge acceptance of uncertainty and chance. And uncertainty is, as somebody who has had a constant grudge match with knowledge for a lot of years, uncertainty scared me to death. And anything that I was going to be uncertain about, anything that I didn't know, or anything I wasn't going to be good at, I retreated from and held in my hands those things that I was certain to be good at. In the last probably 5 years of my life, it's really been focused on the idea that we don't get stronger by working on our strengths. We only get stronger by working on our weaknesses, and isolating those, seeing those, and rather than turning from them going, yep, I'm going to go hard charge at this. Sometimes it turns into a beautiful, wonderful experience. Other times it's a complete debacle because I'll take my non-math minded head and decide that I'm going to try and take a 3-week trigonometry course. Every once in a while you have to confront reality and go, oh yeah, this is something that's going to take more time. And, a week into a 3-week class, the 40% is the sign that, oh, you just need more time with this material. You're not a gazelle here. Slow down. It'll be fine. So yeah, I think that embracing uncertainty, that embracing the idea that chaotic, chaos in the idea of mathematics, chaos theory, is constantly in play. And if we can recognize it and appreciate it and see what it brings to us, that we can find a world that we do constantly have serendipitous moments.
And it's interesting, I just wrote an article about Franklin. Ben Franklin said that there are 3 classes of people in the United States: the people who do nothing, the people who can do something but aren't doing it, and the doers. And what you're saying is that you're in the 3rd class, you're going to do it. Which raises a question, goes back to why? You sound like Jack. Why are you a doer and somebody else is a non-doer? Or, if we divide them equally, a third, why are you in this one group and a third will follow you if you are loud enough and you give them instructions, and the other third are not going to do anything? Why? What is?
Well, I think that I come back to, there's a really interesting book called Start With Why by a guy by the name of Simon Sinek, and it's a phenomenal book about understanding purpose and emotional attachments, and the central idea of his thesis is something that he calls the golden circle. At the center of the circle is why you do what you do. The next ring around that is how you do it, and the outside is what you do. The idea that what is either product that you deliver or individual tasks that have to be accomplished. How you do that is the process, how you get there. But why is purpose. So I think people that are inclined to accomplish things have some sort of, their why is purpose driven, as opposed to product driven. They're not trying to just accomplish a particular end state where now everything is over. You know, oh, I've achieved this goal, I can now sit back and rest comfortably. It's the it's the ethos behind the "don't stop" tattoo on my forearm. Don't stop. Never be comfortable with your successes. Appreciate them, enjoy them, but a success and endeavor just means that now you have time to open up to something new and continue that drive. Why do people have that? I don't know. I'm sure it's some mix of, everything's a mix of nature and nurture. We have a tendency to want to dualize everything as being this or that, and it's neither, and it's both all at the same time. Some of us are, for me, I could probably point to the fact that I was raised in a household where I did a lot of volunteerism as a young kid, and I was raised with the idea of being of service to others, and and doing things that are service oriented and not being completely self-focused. I'm sure that played a part. I'm sure there's also a part of it that's just my neurochemistry is wired where I get more positive, happy hormones. My dopamine's synthesizes better, and I get more endorphins out of doing things for other people than I do out of focusing on myself, which tends to drive me in a more negative headspace. I think everybody falls somewhere on that same continuum, as far as, and we're an altruistic species, whether we behave that way at all times or not. We wouldn't be here if we weren't, and that, or there's at least enough of us that are other focused to drive society forward. But I think in general, that's the reason we give gifts to people. It makes us feel happy to give gifts. Rarely are we doing it out of some drive for reciprocity. There are certainly those obligatory moments where, I give your kid $100 for their wedding and you're going to give my kid $100 for their wedding. Those are people that are peripheral, though. Those aren't part of our, the intimate group of 150 that we can actually care about. Any act that we give towards somebody in that group is because it makes us feel good, ultimately.
This goes back to when I had you in class about free will. We talk about free will and we think we have free will to do anything. Well, the hell we have free will to do anything. We're programmed one way or the other, and we have to recognize where we're getting our drive and channel that.
And see, I'm a free will person. I still believe I've read a little bit about kind of what the neo philosophical neuroscience bent of anti-free will is. I haven't read Sam Harris's book, but I've watched enough of his lectures on, surrounding the topic to have a pretty good sense of that. And I tend to fall more in the Dan Dennett camp of, no, we do have free will, and it's not merely that free will is the ability to make choices and to choose. It is that when confronted with that which is our default setting, we can recognize it and go in another direction. That we have an innate trait where we lean towards one direction, but with enough awareness, we can exert our will. Not merely choice, not merely, left or right, but a true, I don't like who I am headed in this direction. This is my default setting. My default setting is to be a functioning alcoholic. I've chosen to give up drinking because I needed to go on a different path. At the end of the day, it doesn't mean that moment by moment in any given day there isn't a part of the core of my being that is saying, I want this. It means that I've chosen to say, no, this is not acceptable. And it's more than choice, I think.
Yeah, because the pain is going to move you to, if you're trying to address alcoholism, the pain of being an alcoholic could drive you to avoid drinking.
Sure. Or it can drive you further into it. And that's where sentient will part comes in.
And that's the issue that I have about the whole question of free will. Because I'm not sure how much I don't want to feel that pain is really not free will. That is, I don't want to feel that pain, and therefore I do this. or don't do that.
And to a certain extent, I think we start to get to a how many angels can dance on the head of a pin moment, and that there is no absolutist answer. There is no certain answer, because it does so much depend on how do you define free will in any given context and moment and whatnot. I think that what a lot of, at least again, thinking about like Harris's view on free will and things like that, what he states is a lack of free will is more of an assumption that because our endocrine responses, our neurochemistry is deterministic, that implies that there is no freedom of will, that everything at the end of the day is driven by a neurochemical and electrical impulse in our brain. And I may be completely wrong. It stands to chance that I could be, or that I'll revise my opinion in 5 years when I get more data. But I think that there's enough examples in the world around us of people who do have, whether it be alcoholism or addictions of other sorts, whatever, who say, I'm cognizant enough, I'm aware of enough in the moment or outside of the immediate kind of crisis moment to say, this is not working. This is not giving me the cognitive states or the goals are a rational thing. Goals and objectives are rational. Emotions are irrational by very nature. And I think that the example of free will that's best is that when we can say, I recognize that the rational goal or objective that I hold is more important than the emotional drive that is rooted in my limbic brain, and therefore I make the conscious choice and exert my will to move away from this limbic drive, this emotional drive that is implicit and is deterministic, towards consciously embracing something that is neither implicit nor automatically deterministic. We have a lot of really, really great ideas that we never do anything with, and yet all behavior is motivated by emotion. So it's, I think there's a dance in there that makes a case where free will is something that is
and it gets
existent.
back to the question of how you define what free is. I'm not sure how free I am not to act in a way I need to act because of the pain I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a will, but it's a question of how determined that is. And some people will, because the pain is so difficult or so problematic, that they'll just simply quit, or they'll get in here. Going back to Franklin said, some people die at 25 but aren't buried until they're 75.
Sure.
And those are the people that we need to enlighten or help or develop to wake up to.
I don't know you can. I think the
You're
people
putting it into my job of teaching.
I think that it's like anything. The people on the left side of the bell curve are always going to be the people on the left side of the bell curve. And the people that are on the right side of the bell curve are always going to be the people that are on the right side of the bell curve. It's the people that are somewhere between 80 and 20% that you can
movable.
Yeah, absolutely. There are, again, to use a Simon Sinek reference, there are people that only have touch-tone phones because you can't get rotary anymore. The complete technological Luddite is somebody hanging out on the right side of the bell curve. And by that same token, the people that are not in that upper, that are not above the 80% line are never going to be the innovators or most of the early adopters. They're just not. It's not.
And they're not going to want to.
They're not wired that way. If most people were wired to be on the far left end of the bell curve, we wouldn't get anything done, because everybody would be thinking their big thoughts and coming up with their grand ideas, but nobody would be putting in sewer lines. So, it's you can And that's not to say that, that manual laborers don't have deep, brilliant thoughts. Eric Hoffer worked as a longshoreman and wrote some of the most seminal studies on human existence ever. Einstein worked as a patent clerk and came up with the general theory of relativity. It's not about what the work is, it's that people have to do the work. But at the same time, not everybody that is suited to both putting themselves into this physical, grueling, day-to-day existence are also going to be
optimizing what they can do. Is
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a conversation that could take 4 hours right there. But
well, this interview has been very good. Is there, and we're going to have to get out of this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Blueberry Hill pretty quickly. Can you give your son and my listeners to this interview one passing thing that be on your tombstone when you croak? Short one sentence.
Well, there's 15 different things that pop into my head. There's Henley, there's Tecumseh, there's a few other things, but ultimately I think it'll come back to Jung's idea that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. It's only by rooting around in the shadow corners of ourselves and our world where we can shed the things that hold us back, where we can shed the insecurities and the fears, and where we stand a chance of at least 50% of the time trying to do something truly productive. And then probably the only other piece of it is the idea that, again, quoting from Tecumseh, seek to make your life long in its purpose in the service of your people. I think those two things combined probably define my ethos more than anything else.
And it's similar to Saul Alinsky's comment about it's darkest before the dawn, but you have to believe that the dawn's coming, and then it makes sense. And then,
certainly,
Christopher, you've been an excellent student of mine.
Thank you.
And this has turned out to be an excellent interview. I really appreciate it.
I'm glad. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.